Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, I'm going to be opening up some stuff. So I try to put out a midweek mini mail call video every Wednesday, but sometimes I get stuff that's rather large and I'd rather make it a main Saturday video. And that's what I'm doing right here. And what I have here definitely qualifies as the biggest mail call package ever, especially considering there are two. All right, let me dig into opening these up right now. I got to reposition the camera to try to somehow get it so you guys can see it. Oh, maybe I'll stick it on the floor. Yeah, I'll do that. So let's start with this giant box. This is clearly a server box, I'd imagine. It says Dell on the side. And it's got tape from Lowe's, which is a home improvement store here in the US. Lowe's, Home Depot, those are the two big ones that you find everywhere around this country. I think Home Depot you can find in other countries. I know they definitely have it in Canada. I wonder, is that in the UK as well? Lowe's, on the other hand, I'm not sure if it is in Canada. So while this box is rather large, it is definitely well packed because it is not that heavy, which means Chris put lots of bubble wrap or packing material in. Let's see, what do we got here? All right, here it is. You may already be getting a glimpse of what this is. Let me get rid of this bubble wrap here. What we have here is a Franklin Ace 1000. This is an Apple II Plus clone made by Franklin, and this was relatively popular as far as I'm aware machine, although compared to the Apple II line of machines, this sold in far smaller numbers, fractional amounts, I'm sure. I dug into bubble wrap, and there was this anti-static bag here wrapped up and a card inside, the Grappler Plus, which is a printer interface card, parallel printer interface card. Let me just make sure that there is nothing else lingering around in here. Chris, you did an incredible packing job. It's a lot of bubble wrap here, and the machine arrived perfectly unscathed. And I will be reusing this bubble wrap. Check out the second box here that Chris sent me. I'm quite sure this is going to be more stuff for the Franklin. I think probably a floppy drive. I wouldn't be surprised. Yep, definitely looks like an Apple II floppy drive. It says, has a sticker there, disk 1. And it has a floppy disk in it even. This floppy disk says shareware. And there's a second ribbon cable. So this cable here is the Grappler printer interface. So this plugs into the card inside the computer. And this is a Centronics printer connector to go onto a dot matrix printer. There's something else in here though. What is this? Okay, so there's this box here. It says first class cider. Oh, an Apple cider. This is an Apple II hard drive. I had an Apple cider drive for my Apple II GS. I think it was 10 megabytes. Well, let's see what else is in here, if anything. Just some bubble wrap. This is quite the hilarious, huge stack of bubble wrap. I love it. So the Franklin Ace 1000. One of the cool things about this computer, obviously, is it has a numeric keypad. And if you think about the Apple II Plus, it didn't even natively support lowercase characters. It was uppercase only. Not only does this support uppercase and lowercase, as it has a caps lock key, has a whole numeric keypad available as well. This maintains pretty much 100% Apple II Plus compatibility. We'll take a look inside in a second. But something that's problematic about these machines, and this one will 100% be affected by this keyboard is a foam and foil Keytronic keyboard. So you have to replace those little foam pads, otherwise pretty much every key is not going to work. And just like the Apple II line, this thing is expandable, so this top cover comes off. Let's see if I can get this off. There we go. And that pulls away. And this reveals the motherboard, which is pretty much a clone of the Apple II Plus. I think the layout is basically exactly the same. The one difference is this motherboard has a built-in 64K, while the Apple II Plus motherboard, if I'm correct, could only go to 48K, and for the additional 16K to bring it up to a 64 total, you had to plug a card into slot 0, and there was a little cable that plugged into one of the RAM chips that brought the refresh signals and whatnot to the card, because the Apple bus here doesn't have the RAM refresh signals in it natively. But otherwise, I think the layout is very, very similar. Now, one difference I think as well is this uses standard EPROMs. I think these are 2732s or 2716s. So that's nice, because if, say, one of these were missing, I could program it in my regular programmer. I think the Apple II Plus uses something custom Apple style, you know, like a 2316 or something like that. One thing that's also interesting is the power supply on this computer is relatively beefy. It's quite physically large, but it also has a fan. It's right there. So when you turn this thing on, it does make noise, but it also cools the entire computer, which is different than on the Apple IIs, which didn't have a fan on any of them, as far as I'm aware, right? The Apple IIgs, I think, has a space for a fan in the power supply, but none was ever installed. Now, if we take a look at the motherboard under there, one thing that will be visible if I lift this up, and it may be hard to see on camera, but there's an extra circuit board sandwiched down onto the motherboard down there. In fact, this red and black wire that runs from over here in the video section over to that board is a telltale sign of what that board does. That board enables this machine to have artifact color. The Apple II is actually a monochrome computer at heart. It really is. It has no actual color capability natively. Like, it doesn't store a color palette. It has no color values in RAM. None of that. Steve Wozniak came up with an ingenious solution to create color on the Apple II by using NTSC artifacts, and he patented that. So while the rest of the Apple II was not patented, except for I think the ROMs and the BASIC maybe, the way it produced color was patented. So I think initially Franklin copied that mechanism for creating the color, got sued, and they lost. So this machine actually had that color circuitry taken out of it. And then to bring color to this thing, there's a board back there that allows the color to work. And I guess it just does it with some kind of a different mechanism, although whatever they did was some kind of a workaround that actually satisfied the lawyers, and Apple wasn't able to sue them out of existence. So it's unfortunate that there are no expansion cards in this machine. This computer, I think, originally came with a disk controller card and an 80 columns card, and both of those have been removed from this machine. And even though there was this floppy drive that Chris included, maybe it came from a different machine. Franklin did have branded floppy drives, but this machine doesn't seem to have those. And the Cider hard drive here would have had an expansion card as well. I had one for my 2GS that went into there, allowed the hard drive to work. It could boot off of it, etc. And that's missing, unfortunately, too. So without that, I don't think I'm really going to be able to do too much with this Cider. Unless this is just a normal SCSI drive, I'll have to dig into that. What I wanted to do is compare the Apple IIe to the Franklin Ace and show you guys how much of a size difference there is. Of course, the 2E and the 2 Plus are the same size, but if I put this thing sort of in the middle, not only is it longer by about 2 inches, it's also quite a bit wider than the 2E. Looking at these machines from the side will also give you an idea of the difference. Let me line these up so they are the same position. Quite a bit of extra length right here. I'd say height is very similar. If anything, the 2E is actually a little taller than the Franklin, and here the 2E is lined up on the left side, so this shows you the difference in width. Wow. Now the 2E is also just as expandable as this machine. Oh, I forgot how dirty this thing is on the inside. This was one of the earliest retro computers that I got. I think I might have bought this in 2016, and I never really took it apart to give it a good thorough clean on the inside. The machine works. Well, it did at least when I got it. I haven't turned it on lately. You'll notice compared to the Franklin and the 2 Plus the Franklin is copied from, that there are far fewer ICs in this. Apple consolidated a lot of the discrete ICs into these larger chips here as a way to greatly reduce manufacturing cost. This little card here adds an extra 64K of RAM to this machine. You won't be able to see it, but the entire 64K of RAM is right here in 2 single ICs. And then this card here adds an extra 64K for a total of 128 in this machine. So believe it or not, this is actually not my only Franklin Ace. I have another Franklin Ace 1000. The Ace I already have was one I actually bought from someone local here in Portland. This one has had a hard life in a school district. It says Evergreen School District, probably somewhere here in Oregon. And probably angry kids sort of defaced the Franklin Ace 1000 logo. But otherwise, this Ace, the one I already had, is in physically good shape. Opening the Ace I already had, it actually has the original Franklin Ace 80 column card in slot 3 and the original Franklin Ace disc controller card. I also got one of the original Franklin Ace floppy drives with it. This one has, of course, the same foam and foil keyboard with most of the keys not working. Actually, I think a number of them work, but it's every time you use it, it gets worse and worse. But all is not roses inside of this computer. Now, while it looks quite clean inside, it's because I have been through here and I've thoroughly cleaned and washed this entire computer. So even though the lid was on this, the openings here I think are big enough for mice to go through, so they were using this as a little bit of a home. There was tons of rat poop in here, there was rat urine all over it, and some of the wires had been chewed as well. And if you know anything about mouse urine, it's very, very corrosive, probably because it's a little bit of an acid, but it does cause havoc. So there was a lot of disgusting stuff, and it's kind of a hazmat situation too. So I wore gloves and a mask and took this computer apart and then carefully washed and cleaned everything. Every single chip is in a socket, and some of the legs and the sockets are very corroded from the urine. And this machine works sort of, but not quite. In fact, it was working kind of, then I cleaned it, and then it was working basically not at all with garbage on screen. And then I kind of looked at each of the sockets that looked really corroded and tried to clean them by sanding and stuff. Now it turns on and it tries to boot again, but it actually can't boot anything. It just crashes every time. This one does have the color card under the keyboard as well. So both of these units have the color card. And it's funny because it's so hard to find any information at all about that color card. But supposedly it's more advanced than standard Apple II color, and you can do things like give color text as well, but I can't find any information on how to do that. I found a review of the Franklin Ace 1000 in a magazine called Interface Age from 1983, and it's talking about the color interface card that's added under the keyboard here. What caught my eye is it says besides the standard Apple II colors, it can provide 48 colors and 256 hues, but existing software couldn't take advantage of these, and only stuff that you wrote or was written specifically for it could. Now, I certainly wish I could find information about how to take advantage of these colors and if this card really can do it, but that's a pretty cool feature for such an old machine. I have been in this power supply to service it as well. I replaced the fan because it was extremely noisy, maybe from mice that going in there. This also had leaky noise filtering on the input, and the X cap between the ground and live on this was leaking. So if I plugged this power supply into anything that had an RCD or GFCI ground fault interrupter, it would trip that breaker immediately because it was leaking. So I took out that filtering stuff, and now this thing works fine. It may well be that the power supply in this new machine from Chris also has the leaky cap, so it might cause that issue. But I can take the cards out of that other machine and put them in here so we can test booting this computer up to see if it works. Okay, I have this power cord plugged into a ground fault protected circuit, but it's different than the stuff here that all my retro computers on my bench are plugged into. But these lights are plugged into it. So I plugged this in and my studio lights shut off. That is because there is some leakage on this power supply, just like the other one. So let's give it a try. So far, so good, but I might do it when I hit the power switch. It worked. Oh, and I have to say, the fan in this power supply is quite quiet. So because there's no disc controller card, it's just going to say Ace 1000 version 2.2. Just boot straight up into that. And let's push a key. Okay, F works. G does not. So just like my other one, a lot of keys are not working very well. Also, an improvement over the Apple II Plus is on the front right here. There's actually a button, and when you push that, it's a reset button. And it's not on the keyboard, so you're not going to accidentally push it while you're typing. It's down here on the front. So I don't know the status of that floppy drive. So I do have an Apple II floppy drive right here that I know works. It's using an ALPS mechanism, the same one that is used in the 1541. It's exactly the same mechanism as far as I can tell, except, of course, the electronics are different because this connects to the Apple II instead of the processor board in the 1541, but it's interesting to see this mechanism just used everywhere. Here is the Franklin Ace disc controller card. That label's has seen better days because of the mice, but the card itself does work. It was not peed on because, of course, it wasn't laying flat like the motherboard. And what I also like is the two floppy drive connectors have the shroud around them, which with a key. One of the issues is if you accidentally plug the floppy drive cable in backwards on an Apple II, it will destroy things because 12 volts are on these pins, and flipping the connector I think shorts out stuff in the disk drive. It doesn't damage the card, if I recall. But on this one, because it's keyed, you can't even plug it in incorrectly. This is an original Apple Disk 2 controller card. It's 16, which I guess it means it's the 16 sector version, I think, as opposed to 13 sectors. Someone will have to correct me. I'm probably wrong in the comments. You have to admire Steve Wozniak and his genius. Look how few ICs there are on this board to do the disk controller duties. You don't even see like a ROM chip or anything like that. The disk controller card that's in the Franklin is a lot larger than this, has an EPROM and a bunch more ICs, but essentially these two cards are interchangeable and do the same thing. Unfortunately, this cable on this drive doesn't have the key on it, but it does say pin 1 right there and right there on these connectors, so that would be the red stripe. So the red stripe is where the pin 1 is. And then this card goes into slot 6. So we just push that in there. And now powering this on, we should see this thing light up. There it is. So I'll reset out of that. All right, I have a disc here that has Fat City, an Apple II game I used to play quite a bit as a kid. It's got music and it's got color graphics. Of course, this only has regular Apple II graphics. It does not have a double high res like the Apple II C and the 2E Enhanced and everything above that. I got to power cycle this to see if this boots up. We should get color screen. Look at that. The color is way too high on this TV here. Okay, I have no choice, so let's see if the K key works. It does. So I can actually start the game. Enter your name. See what keys work. Enter works. So I gotta say the video output, whoa! That would be, woo boy! Oh, the good old RIFA. The good old RIFA. Oh dear. Oh boy. That popped. That pops. Ooh, and it stinks. Oh, the worst smell. You know, why didn't I just open this thing up? Because I knew that it would have a RIFA in there, and I didn't. I rushed to trying this thing out. I should have just gone straight to opening that thing up. All right, no harm done. It doesn't destroy or damage anything. It just stinks up the whole joint. All right, serves me right. Let's get the power supply out of this thing. The screws on this are on the bottom. What a stinky, stinky mess. Boy, you know, there's so many times I've done this. Like, I've allowed myself to not do what I should do and basically take out the RIFAs. I just go right for trying it out, and then this happens. Oh, yes. I'm still laughing about this. Rule of thumb is if the machine is old, like it's, you know, before the late 80s, you pretty much have to assume that if there's mains input voltage on it, like it has an internal power supply, that would be on an Apple II Plus or TRS-80 or Macintosh or anything like that that takes mains voltage, it's going to have RIFAs, or it'll have some kind of, you know, X capacitors. They're not always RIFAs, but sometimes they are, and when they are, and they're this old, especially when you go to use them, they leak. And the RIFAs, the X caps, are installed across hot and the neutral line. When they start to fail, they start to leak, and they get hotter and hotter and hotter, and of course that just is like a cascade failure for them, and eventually they will completely short, and then that just causes them to blow, because of course, you know, you're hooked up to mains voltage, and here in the US, we got 15 amps, 120 volts, and of course in Europe, you might have a fused plug that could potentially trip, you know, break, it would blow the fuse on the plug, but I doubt it, because these things are so old, it doesn't take a whole lot to kill them. And that RIFA stinks. The power supply is really nicely made. This cover is completely aluminium or aluminum. And here we go. 0.22 microfarad RIFA. This is the one that exploded. There's a 0.1 X cap here as well. And up here are additional X caps. This is before it even gets to the power supply board. These are the ones that were leaky on my other power supply. I think it was maybe this one. I can't really remember. So what I decided to do actually is I just completely removed everything from this board. I cut them off, and this inductor, bypassed everything, because I mean, this is just additional filtering. It really is not necessary. This power supply already has filtering on it. This is just some additional noise suppression, probably some FCC thing or whatever. So When you take off some of these, you need to make sure that you take all of it off, otherwise you're going to leave weird resonances. Remove all of this, and I will also replace these RIFAs. This power supply is very serviceable. There's a connector here that basically has the low voltage, but it also has the mains input voltage on it. I mean, there's some space between the pins, luckily. The fan disconnects, and the power supply just has 4 screws, so you can lift this straight out like that. First, I'm going to attack this power supply board, and then I'm going to remove this extra filtering here just to get rid of any possibility of tripping the breakers. Oh, well, these came out. What a gross thing. When these explode, they're pretty nasty. Kind of shoots a bunch of gunk all around on the nearby components. So you want to clean that off with alcohol because it stinks. This gunk stinks. I don't think it causes any issues, but it's pretty gross. All right, so that RIFA, that blue, is a 22. So I have a 22 here. So the new caps are always a lot skinnier in size. So you kind of have to bend the leads out and form them to be the right size to go back in the holes. The polarity on these types of caps is not important. So I haven't soldered this in yet, but it's a little bit scary because this cap here, it goes between the ground, the DC ground, and regular earth. And live is right here, and this fuse. This is 120 volts, and so is that pin. It goes right underneath this capacitor. Now, I guess that's enough distance between this metal right here and this cap. And worst case is if it does connect to that, it will go straight to earth ground, which would trip the breaker. But I don't know. I don't exactly love that. Okay, so those are good. Let me just do a quick check of the other capacitors. Just look for any telltale signs of leaking or other problems. I mean, the thing worked. It powered up without issue. Definitely no leaking. The caps that are on here are the Tracon brand. Tracon. I don't exactly know them. But at the time this was made in the early 80s, there weren't a lot of cap manufacturers, right? They weren't the Chinese ones that we had sort of into the late 90s and early 2000s that caused so many issues, the kind of plague of things failing due to bad electrolytics. There's some gunk on the heat sinks here. I just used this air to blow off any of the dust. This looks clean, and I'd say this thing is ready to go back into service. Before we do that, though, I'm going to remove this filter board back here, and I will cut off these components and bypass them. So with all the components removed from the circuit board, I just cut them off. The IEC input jack, which is this, and the power switch, nothing's connected together. If I try to use it as this, there will be no power to the power supply. So I have to basically either remove this and just connect the wires together, or I just need to jump the components I removed. So basically, the caps don't really carry any current, but that inductor, which I did remove, it does. So the neutral comes through this trace and it jumps across here, and there was an inductor which I've removed, and the same for the live. There's an inductor that's also gone. So I just need to jump these two together, and that will make this thing work without these components, but it will at least allow the power to flow. And I think that's the easiest thing to do. I'll remove the solder here, and I'll just add little wires there. All right, there we go. I put 2 loops in there, and they're even the right color for the hot and the neutral. These are the North American colors. Black is hot, white is neutral. There's some of that RIFA gunk on the inside of this cover. I'm going to clean that just to help eliminate the stinky smell. All right, where were we? Does this thing work? Let's try. Yes, it works. And hopefully the smell should dissipate, but that'll take a little bit of time. I made a little label here. It says RIFA caps replace, that is. July 17th, 2020. Well, that is the current date. I'll just stick that on the power supply right there. All right, let's put the disk controller back into slot 6 here. So as I was saying before I got interrupted by an exploding cap, the video output quality on this thing, the picture is clear, but I gotta say, there isn't a lot of contrast. Oh, wish I could stop the music. It seems like the color information is a lot brighter than the white, like in this K. So everything just kind of looks dark and then also oversaturated. Now right here on the motherboard is a little potentiometer, and I'm going to try tweaking that just to kind of see what that does. I bet you that adjusts the video output level, and it does indeed. My little tool's getting messed up. These are little ceramic screwdrivers, so they're non-conductive. That way, you don't accidentally run the risk of shorting things out. So I'm just going to find one that fits in here. Okay, there we go. That one fits. I'm going to put a little bit of Deoxit right onto the potentiometer, just because it's one of those carbon track type whatever, and they get kind of scratchy. So let's see, I'll turn this back and forth. Oh yeah, so, okay, so you can turn the picture all the way down. There's almost nothing visible there. And we can turn this up, and it definitely looks a whole lot better when that's turned up. So I had gone in the menu on the TV, and I had turned the color way down because it was so oversaturated. It was still pretty saturated, but it's looking overall a lot better. The K, the white parts look correct. Let's enter the game here. Please enter your name. Maybe I've turned it up a little too high. Let's turn this down a little bit. Yeah, overall, this looks a lot better. So without the working keyboard, it's going to be hard for me to do anything here, but the idea is... Okay, I can't stop. So the idea is you're supposed to use a wrecking ball and destroy the city. And you have fuel, which is this thing here, or on level number 1, and you can go up and down, left and right, and you got to destroy the building. And residents are throwing bricks at you like that and a tomato because they don't want to lose their house, right? There's another tomato. Once you destroy everything in the city, you go to the next level and it gets harder, etc., etc. I loved this game, and you know, it's a creative use of the colors that the Apple II has. And as you can see, this Franklin produces nice, solid colors. All right, let's try Tapper. I think this is Tapper. This should work on the Apple II Plus, which this is compatible with. Or not. Oh, wait, it's still booting. Okay. Oh, I wanted me to push 1 or 2. Oh, it still does. Yeah, the music on the Apple II is pretty sad compared to, say, on the Commodore 64. Okay, well, without a working keyboard, I can't really do much with this. It's working, though. That's great. All right, well, I want to test this other floppy drive, so I'm going to pop this one off. Actually, I think before we try this one, I'm going to open the cover up, take a look inside. This has a keyed connector, at least. Oh, look, and it's got this ribbon cable here that has some actual shielding on it. That's nice. The question is, whose mechanism is going to be in here? Tandon? Or Shugart? Or who, I wonder? Obviously, they've put custom drive electronics in it because it's not the regular MFM or FM controller. There we go. But yeah, this thing is clean. It is really clean inside. I don't even see any dust. So this thing was probably used, but I don't know how much. All right, no disc is in here. Let's see if we hear the regular Apple Seek sound on power up. Yeah, makes it. Sounds a bit weird, though. Let's try Fat City again. Well, it definitely loaded the game. It sure sounds weird. Seeking, though. Let's try Load Runner. I played a lot of this as well back on the Apple II. It's definitely working fine. There we go. It loaded fine, and this thing has good quality picture. This thing definitely is working well. I always hated how it did this on the Apple II. It was so slow, and I played this so much, and it was every time I died, it was so frustrating to watch it so slowly go in and go out. I mean, clearly the level was loaded. That's just a graphical effect that does nothing but waste time. Looking inside the floppy drive, I see the head moves with this rotating assembly, which is very much like a Shugart mechanism. So either this is a clone or it's an actual Shugart, because it basically uses this spinning mechanism with this groove in it, basically, to move the heads back and forth. It doesn't use a stepper motor like typical drives. So to hook an original 35-track Shugart mechanism to a PC, it only works if you slow down the seek time. And you have to do that with a little BIOS program. Otherwise, you'll just get read errors constantly because it won't seek correctly. But this is definitely looks like a Shugart mechanism. And okay, well, that's kind of cool. And that's why it sounds funny. It's kind of quiet. As it's moving the head a lot, that spinny thing with the groove moves quite a bit, and it makes these kind of scratchy sounds. So I spent a little bit of time cleaning the top of this disk drive. It had that paper label and glue and stuff, and now it looks absolutely perfect. There's a little bit of a scratch in the paint right here, but otherwise this is in great shape. I use this stuff here, Goof Off, to get this off. This is a very powerful solvent, and it just dissolves glue like nothing. The danger of this is it's very strong, and you do not really want to use this on any kind of plastics, especially ABS. It just melts it immediately. So I found it's safe to use this on things like metal, but for instance, I wouldn't use it on this black faceplate here because it would definitely just melt the texture right off of here. I was also curious, so I took the drive out of the bottom case, and absolutely, this is actually a SugarArt Associates 390 drive. So maybe the 390 is the version that they sold to Apple and companies like this, where it didn't have the drive electronics and it allowed them to use their own electronics board. But either way, this motor here is the one that controls the head assembly, and on the top side, there's this spinning disc with a groove in it, and that's why it makes the sound that just sounds very different than all the later drives that use stepper motors instead. I'm quite amazed that the overall condition of this drive, though, is absolutely perfect. So I'm just going to give this a final clean, give this a bit of 303 aerospace protectant, and a tiny bit of lubricant in this track so this thing is just extra smooth. But this drive is fantastic. So the Ace 1000 that Chris gave me, I gave it a quick clean, and I gotta say, this thing is pretty amazing condition. There's just a couple little scratches here and there on this, but for something as old as this, wow. Hey, just for fun, because the 2E is out, I might as well turn this thing on, see if it even works. Maybe we'll have another explosion with the RIFA cap. I plugged the SugarArt disk drive here into the Apple disk controller card. You have to make sure you plug it in the right way, or you could cause that destruction of the drive. Let's put that in and turn this on. All right, well, that's nice to see that it's definitely working. And I think this keyboard, unlike this one, does totally work. It's not a foam and foil keyboard, so there won't be any issues there. And there it is. All right, I have a couple observations looking at this game running, which I was just running a little while ago on the Franklin. The color saturation of the colors is definitely less on the 2E. Also, I have to say that the brightness of the picture is pretty similar now that I've adjusted the Franklin. In addition, the sharpness of the overall picture is actually a lot more. The edges of the purple and the other colors sort of bled a lot more on the Franklin than is happening on the 2E. So the 2E definitely has overall better picture quality than the Franklin does. Now, this might be a side effect of the fact that there is less color saturation, but there also appears to be less color fringing around the white text on the Apple IIe here than on the Franklin. That could easily just be because the color saturation is less, though, because there still is color fringing. There always is. When you just play white text when the color is turned on an Apple II, you're going to get a little bit of color fringing. Like on high score here, I see some green and purple around the edges of these letters, and that's just the way the color works on the Apple II. I'm pretty sure all the letters should be working. Let me just do a quick test of the keyboard. Hey, this keyboard actually feels pretty nice to type on. Yeah, so that's nice to see that my Apple IIe is still working fine. High-res mode there, looks good. Yeah, this is working well, and all the keys work excellent. So I've put on the bench my other 1000, the one that's not working properly, and I've removed the top lid. It's easy to take the top off. I think it's just like on the Apple IIe and II Plus. There are just screws that are around the perimeter of the metal plate that's on the base, and then the whole plastic part just lifts off. The keyboard connects right here to the motherboard. It's using a connector that plugs into a chip socket. So with the cover out of the way, we can get a full look at the entire motherboard. Now this is the color board for the Franklin Ace 1000. This might be the first time this has ever been shown on YouTube, because I really couldn't find a single photograph of this entire board. But without this, you don't get any color output on the Franklin. It connects to the motherboard right here. I think this is the character ROM, and it would normally be installed in that socket. And then there is another connector, this multi-pin connector here, and is going down into a chip socket. As you see here, there are also some additional connections that come from various points on the motherboard, and they connect right here. And then this wire right here is the video output, as far as I can tell, that goes to the back of the motherboard and out into the monitor. Now, if I turn this machine on, it does work. I mean, it turns on and it tries to boot off the floppy drive, and if I hit reset, we end up in basic. If I unplug this cable that goes to the back of the motherboard, then we will get no picture at all on the video output. I am curious what happens if I unplug these connectors. Let's unplug this top one here and see if we get any picture still. No, we don't have any video output still. There is a video signal. I see a flash, but we're not getting actually any text. And let's unplug this other one here. So without this other one, it seems to be stuck in low resolution mode and there's no color as well. But that would be the logo up there. If I hit the reset, I guess that's the basic prompt down there. With everything reconnected, we have a working computer again. Well, working as well as this thing works. Well, I think I'm going to end part 1 of this Franklin Ace 1000 series right here. A huge thank you to Chris for sending me that Franklin Ace 1000. It's awesome that it's working absolutely perfectly, other than, of course, those keyboard foam pads, which need to be replaced, and that was a given. If you know anything about that color add-on board in the Ace 1000, and if there's actually a way to take advantage of those extra colors that I talked about in that review, I'd love to know. Please let me know in the comment section below. In the next part of this series, I'll look into what's actually wrong with the Franklin Ace 1000 that I already had, and we'll end up getting to fixing the keyboard as well, and then hopefully fixing the Ace 1000 itself. So keep your eyes peeled for that video. It'll come up in the near future. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, but if you didn't, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs down button, hit the subscribe button to subscribe to my channel, and if you want to be notified when I post videos, hit that little bell icon. And then, of course, put your comments and suggestions in the comment section below, and that's going to be it. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.